Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, episode 69.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense, in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 69 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Today's sponsor is sellmorefirearms.com. Sellmorefirearms.com, where you can get a free guide, 10 tips on using Facebook to sell more firearms using Facebook and social media. So head over to sellmorefirearms.com, enter your email address. You'll be signed up for the sellmorefirearms.com newsletter, and you'll get the free guide, 10 tips on selling more firearms using Facebook and social media. Today's guest is Dan Wos. Dan is the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy and several other books. And now, here's Dan.
Dan Wos, welcome to the show.
Hey, James. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Dan, you are the author of two books, Good Gun, I'm messing up the title. Good Gun, Bad Guy. Would you tell us a little about those?
Sure. Yeah, Good Gun, Bad Guy, Behind the Lies of the Anti-Gun Radical. That's the first book. And really talks a lot about the anti-gun mindset and the strategies and tactics that they use, in conversation and the way they try to manipulate the narrative, change the entire gun landscape, and put people in kind of a perpetual state of fear of guns. So what I do is I expose a lot of the strategies and tactics and talk about what their mission is and how they go about doing it. The Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, Destroying the Anti-Gun Narrative, continues that conversation, but it focuses more on the media's role and how they play into the false, gun narrative, and some of the really deceitful and hard to recognize strategies that they use to convince people, again, to be scared of guns and hateful toward gun owners.
And you talked in the first book about that encounter you had in Albany with your wife. And had that not happened, do you think you would have made the switch?
Well, that's a great question. I've never actually had that question. So let me try to explain it like this. At that point, I had started to become more aware of the importance of firearms in our society, why we have them, why we use them, why we have them in our homes, why we carry them. So I probably would have been down the same trajectory. However, that incident really solidified it for me and made it absolutely clear how important it is to protect yourself and your family. Now, the way I came to that particular point in my life was, I told the story probably 1,000 times, but I was originally, when I was a kid, my father took me out hunting and target shooting, so I was not unfamiliar with guns. I knew how to use them. I knew how to use them safely. We cleaned them. We took them apart. We did the whole thing, and he really taught me how to respect firearms. So I grew up with an understanding. It was when I started, as I say, hanging with the wrong crowd, that I started to develop more of an anti-gun mindset. And it's because I got caught up in all the propaganda and all the anti-gun rhetoric, too, through my 20s, during my 20s. So it started to, I found myself, and when I say hanging with the wrong crowd, what I mean is hanging with people who were anti-gun, liberal mindset people, not necessarily bad people. And these aren't bank robbers and murderers. And when I say hanging with the wrong crowd, they weren't drug addicts or anything like that. but they were of that anti-gun sort of liberal progressive mindset. And it's a dangerous place to be, because what it does is it convinces you that not protecting yourself is a good thing and putting yourself in danger, and it teaches you that guns are bad and dangerous, and they're the cause of killings, and it teaches you all that stuff. And these people over there who perpetuate this narrative are really caught up in it. They can't see outside that box. So what happened to me was I started to see outside the box, because I had come from a pro-gun family. So the two ideals, or the two ideologies, or the two notions, pro-gun and anti-gun, just weren't mixing well in my mind. And then it was that incident in Albany, New York, when I almost needed to protect my wife, and I knew that night that I wasn't able to do it if things had really gone down the way they could have. So I guess that's a really long way of kind of explaining to you how I came to write this book. But that's pretty much how it happened. So it was just very transitional. It was pro-gun into an anti-gun and back to a healthy pro-gun stance.
And so if someone had been trying to reach you in that period of time before you started thinking about firearms again, what would have been, can you imagine a way they would have been able to do it?
If they, okay, let me see if I understand the question. If during my, let's call it my anti-gun haze, if someone was trying to reach me with respect to helping me see the importance of firearms?
Yes.
Is that okay? Yes. How would they do it? Is that the question?
Yeah, because I think a lot of times those of us that are 2A activists, sometimes you feel like you're talking to the choir. Sometimes you feel like you'll never be able to persuade someone that's anti-gun. But for someone, if you've been on both sides, can you imagine a way that?
Sure.
An effective way? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the most effective way is to help people see how they are being manipulated, and to do it in a non-confrontational way. Now, we all get confrontational over this topic at times, but to help people actually see that they're looking at this thing through a lens of fear, a lens of gun fear. And I'll tell you a little story, and this might help explain how people see this thing and how maybe to help them. I have a friend who is anti-gun, and she, we talk occasionally, and the topic comes up about guns. And one day she's telling me, she said, Dan, I know your position on guns, but I just think they're so dangerous. I was in the bank the other day, and this guy was standing right in line, right in front of me, and he had a gun on him. He had a gun right on him, and you could, it was right there in plain sight. And now this must have been a security guard, off-duty security guard or something, in line at the bank. Probably just cashing his check, and he had his open carry, handgun on him. Well, she thought that was the craziest thing, and I couldn't understand why this was such an issue for her. So I kept pushing and asking, and ultimately what came out was she believed that because that guy had a gun in plain sight, that someone would do something dangerous. She even told me, she said, I could have grabbed that gun and started shooting people. So when she told me this, I was really shocked that she actually came out and said that, because what she did was she revealed a lot about herself. And she revealed that in her mind, in her thought process, she imagined herself taking that gun out of this guy's holster and shooting people. In other words, what this tells me is that these people believe that the gun makes you do bad things. And this is the whole piece, that if we can help them understand that their perspective is skewed, their view is through a lens of irrational gun fear and and an irrational thought process that the gun is the culprit, the gun plays an active role. If we can help them see that, we can help them see reality a little bit clearer on this topic. So to answer another long way of answering your question, but had someone come to me and explained that like I just explained it to you in a clear way, to help me see how people are, in a sense, brainwashed or conditioned to not see truth, to not see reality. Had someone come to me, that would have helped. And that's how we can help them, is by not bashing them with statistics and yelling at them and telling them they're wrong, but helping them see their own thought process on the topic, and help compare their thought process with what's actually in reality, where guns actually save lives, and guns aren't bad, guns are good. So if we can help them make that bridge and connection between their thought process and reality, we can help them. So, James, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Yeah. So you went through this process, and you talk a little bit about the, how training or retraining and, convincing your wife. At what point did you decide to write a book? The
book was a big accident, and here's how it happened. I wrote an article called, it was a blog, basically, called Fear of Guns. And it was about that night. It told about the details of that story and how I was, in a sense, converted. And that article got picked up by a bunch of websites, and I started noticing it getting passed around. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. It was just me expressing myself almost in a journal-like form, something that, maybe you really didn't intend for the whole world to see it. But they started to see it. And I got requests from websites. American Military News was one of them, and they asked me to start writing, op-eds, and I started writing more on the topic. And before I knew it, I was looking at different topics within the gun conversation, and I started writing. And I'll give you an idea here of what some of the chapters in the book. The first book, false narrative, sitting at the popular table, ignorance is bliss, gun-free zones, responsibility of freedom, how they building utopia concept, truth about guns, a lot of these topics. So I started writing these articles and these blogs, and I noticed that there was something happening, and those blogs were actually chapters or beginnings of chapters for a book. And so I started putting together the book, and the title "Good Gun, Bad Guy" was blatantly clear to me. And so it accidentally happened. But I say the book wrote itself. It almost did. I was just a kind of a passive player in the whole thing. And during the research for that first book is when things really started to unfold for me, and when I really started to see the manipulation of the narrative. And that's when it got really, really cool for me, is to really start to dig in and see what they're doing to try to keep people in that perpetual state of fear. The second book was just a culmination of that first book, and just kept going, and momentum just kept going. So yeah, so there you have it. That's how it happened.
And you mentioned, having to sort of persuade your wife when you decided that you were going to start carrying for self-defense. And I see that come up a lot in gun forums where, guys will buy a gun and their wife will, tell them turn around, take it back. And how did that process go for you?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of the. It starts that night in Albany at the Crossgates Mall when we were in potential danger. When we got back to the car, and I realized that I probably felt the most shameful that I've ever felt in my life, embarrassed. I would have been unable to protect my own wife in that situation. I got in the car, and we were, we made it out of the situation unharmed, and we're going to head home. And I put the key in the ignition. I remember it's like it was yesterday. I put the key in the ignition, and I looked over at her she was in the passenger seat, and I said, "I'm sorry." And she said, "Why are you apologizing? You didn't do anything." And I said, "I know, but I don't. But I don't know that I would have been able to, protect you or me or both of us tonight. It was a bad situation. Luckily, we got out okay, but I had no way of really defending us. And so I said, I'm sorry. Well, so that's how that started. So then over the course of the next week or two, and by the way, I told her that night in the car, I said, I'm getting a gun. And she came from a kind of a non-gun family. They really didn't, her family really didn't take a position on guns either way. But she was definitely unfamiliar. She didn't know anything about guns. I at least came from a family where I knew about guns. And so convincing her was, convincing her to get on board was a little bit of a challenge. One day she saw a new safe in the house, and she started questioning the safe. Well, what's that? And so I, had to break the news to her. And some people say, well, this is something you need to discuss with your wife or husband, and yeah, that's true. You need to discuss it, but I believe you need to get them on board. And I don't believe that defending your house, defending your family is an option. I think it's a necessity, and I think it's so what I did was I helped her feel comfortable through the process, and I took her along with me through all the training and the holsters and studying everything I could get my hands on about concealed carry and gun ownership and safes and what type of gun would I carry and all the training. I had to retrain, and I got a lot of my friends were gun owners, people that I knew, so they were helpful. But I got her on board in a comfortable way for her. I didn't force it, but she knew that I wasn't going to, go the other way. And so that's pretty much how I do it. Like I say, it's not really a negotiation. I'm sorry, I don't feel that it's a negotiation. I feel that it's important to do, and rather than ask, I would suggest you get them on board.
This all took place in New York, and I think a lot of people listening, a lot of people throughout the country think that there might be one or two gun owners in New York, and that the rest of the state is just completely anti-gun. So, what was the process like? Was it hard to get a carry permit? Was it hard to find training? How?
No, it's really not. I'm not down in New York City, so we're in what's considered upstate New York.
Oh.
I live in a city called Saratoga Springs, beautiful place, but it's a liberal run, Democrat run. Not happy with the leadership here in our city, but I'm very happy with the city itself. It's a beautiful place to be. But we do recognize the Second Amendment in this area, most upstate. This is actually a very an area where there's a lot of hunters, a lot of gun owners. I mean, upstate New York is completely different than what you might think New York is, because New York tends to get tainted with that New York City image. It's nothing like that. We have the Adirondack Mountains up here, which is just a beautiful place. Lots of hunting and gun ownership. So it wasn't that bad. My particular county, requires, a concealed carry license, and they have two stages of the license. They have a restricted for hunting and target, which I think is a bunch of nonsense. But then they have you can take additional courses and additional training, and you can get that unrestricted license. So the process was pretty standard actually, but it is concealed carry here. Open carry is not an option.
Great. And I always ask my guests if there's any books they recommend. Obviously, I'm going to put links to yours on the show notes page, but are there any books that you read that sort of shaped your opinions on guns or the Second Amendment before writing your own?
Well, John Lott has a book called More Guns, Less Crime. Dana Lash has a great book, Hands Off My Gun. And so there's a lot of great books. You know, the John Lott book is very statistic based, which is all good stuff. You need to know that stuff. And Dana's goes more into the psychology and different things. Boy, there's just a ton of books out there. But those two right there, I would say definitely get your hands on those. And those are very good books.
Great. And what's in the future for you? What are your plans in 2A world? Any guns or any books? No.
I'm actually working on Good Gun, Bad Guy 3. It's always in kind of a state of formation, you know. So I just don't know if and when it will come out. I'm doing a lot of radio, a lot of shows like yours, and done some national things. I'm going to Chicago to speak at a big event here soon. I show up at gun shows and do book signings as often as I can. Going around the country, I've been asked to do tons of events. Most of them I can't do. There's just so many opportunities out there. But I try to get out there on TV, radio, and as many speaking events as possible to spread the word and help people understand that this anti-gun message and this narrative that's out there is not true. It's fake. It's just not a real thing, and we have to shed some light on it. So basically, that's what I'm doing. I'm as active as I possibly can at the moment, and just out there, you know, trying to spread the word.
And where can folks try and find you online?
Well, they can get the book, Good Gun, Bad Guy, and Good Gun, Bad Guy 2 at goodgunbadguy.com or goodgunbadguy.net. You can search it on Amazon. And you can find me on Facebook and Twitter. My name is Dan Wos, and that's DanWos, as in Sam. And, that's probably the best way, goodgunbadguy.net or Facebook.
All right. Okay. And I thank you very much for being on the show. Any parting words for our listeners?
No, that's it. I appreciate the opportunity here, and good luck with your show. You're doing a fantastic job, and thanks for having me on, and hope to do it again.
Great. Look forward to having you on again when we get book number 3 out.
Thank you. Thanks so much, James. Good talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to episode 69 of the Out of Order Gun Rights podcast. To the show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/69. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.